Chances are you've heard it before. A very, very quick cursory Google search of this particular quote turned up multiple very, very famous and historical and really, really smart people over time that have used this statement. I have had this statement told to me in numbering in the hundreds of times. So chances are you've heard it at least once. Our topic today is, what does it really mean to inspect what you expect? Today on the Maintenance Mindset.
AppWork is one of our founding sponsors. Much more than maintenance, AppWork is advanced business intelligence. Streamline maintenance workflows and keep an eye on the leaderboard as your service teams enjoy the gamification of maintenance. Visit appworkco.com and transform your productivity today.
Sometimes it's instructive to break down a saying that you've heard or said multiple, in this case, millions of times. Inspect what you expect. Stop there just at the beginning. Let's focus on that first word. What does inspect mean to you? I know when I talk about an inspection or performing one and getting ready for one or reviewing the results of one, I have a thought in my head for what that means. But I wonder if it's the same thought that you have. For instance, within the multifamily industry, we have a lot of inspections that we end up going for. On the maintenance side of the house, some of the most essential are a regular property inspection, where you look over your entire community. For business, especially where occupancy is concerned, a make-ready inspection is critical. What about an amenity inspection? Due diligence. Now, there's an inspection that doesn't happen every day, but it's extremely critical from a financial standpoint, a business development standpoint, and even down to our individual job responsibilities and tasks. What about a safety inspection? Have you ever conducted one of those? There's a lot of synonyms for it. A safety audit, a safety review. Matter of fact, every single one of these things that we've discussed or I've brought up could be called any number of things. And in the end, they come back to an inspection. As I was beginning to think about how to approach this particular topic, an article came across my desk from ASHRAE. Now, ASHRAE is the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers. This is a group of individuals that their job is to tell manufacturers the standards on how to make indoor equipment. They review energy audits. They look at, create the standards and update the standards for comfort and what is expected in the microcosm of air conditioning, but it's even bigger than that. They review entire buildings and look at their energy footprint and how a building, a property, a location uses energy, especially regarding the indoor environment and refrigerated spaces. So they get involved in just about everything. They have an impact everywhere. Well, I find it interesting that they actually break down their inspection to 3 levels. Level 1, level 2, and level 3. That's kind of simple way of identifying them, but they have different purposes and different focuses. You see, an ASHRAE level 1 audit is a simple walkthrough. In other words, it is the way conditions are right this instant and what you experience on a normal day. An ASHRAE Level 2 inspection, that is described as a physical and a financial or data inspection. In other words, they take a walkthrough looking at conditions the way they are today, and they look at the background information that explains why conditions are the way they are today. The third level, and just by way of a little side note, these by no means are intended to be a full instructional course on what the differences between the levels of ASHRAE are. I'm not qualified to speak towards that. But in general, a level 3 ASHRAE audit is an audit focused on historical performance so that you can look ahead. In other words, how's our building, our space, our equipment operating right now? What is it that led up to how it's operating right now? And what information can we take from those first two levels that we can use to make decisions about the future? Now, I happen to really, really like this testing framework, this inspection framework, level 1, level 2, and level 3. And I happen to believe that it has a direct correlation or a direct application to how we perform inspections on our properties. Let's discuss them first together, and then we'll break them out into the 3 individual levels and how we can use them in various ways at our communities. A level 1 inspection, property, let's call it a multifamily inspection, is a how is it right now inspection. In other words, this is an inspection where we begin to review the conditions on whatever it is we're looking at. If we're looking at the entire property, how is the property set right now, right this instant? A level 2, for us, that is a scheduled event. And it would end up including both the physical property conditions as well as a file audit or a financial review or a PO, spreadsheet, P&L, all of that data that we bring to a lot of meetings. And that would be considered a level 2 review. A level 3 multifamily inspection would end up taking both the property condition today, all of that data that we brought with the level 2, but then a sit down time where the leaders get together, review that information, verify that everybody has the same understanding of the information, and begin to suggest or make decisions for going forward. Now, you may have already realized that these inspections will require a partnership at all 3 levels between a property's leaders, and that is leaders on site, as well as corporate if you happen to work for a larger organization. And then it requires a partnership with the workers on site. In other words, maybe here's where we begin to get to the second half of that statement. Inspect what you expect. In other words, do the people on site have the same level of expectation surrounding inspections? A way to apply this, or a way to think about this, is let's begin at a level 1 multifamily inspection. We could think of this again as a property inspection or a make-ready inspection. Those are probably the 2 most common ones that occur for our on-site maintenance teams. So the very first one is a look at the today situation of whatever our topic is. And it goes for that partnership requirement for leadership and the property workers to have an expectation. The property workers, the expectation needed for that is that the property is always ready. Now, if we're breaking down definitions in terms, what does always mean? I mean, let's be honest. A lot of our management companies and the way we process data and the way we look at things, we want the property written down inspection to be great, positive, glowing review. But if we believe that the property is always in good inspection ready state, do we need to schedule a level 1 review? My argument is no. If we as owners, managers, CEOs, regionals, property managers, maintenance supervisors, all of the levels of leadership, if all the levels of leadership have the understanding that the property is always inspection ready, in other words, it is always meeting or attempting to meet the good standards that our management companies or our owners' practices, policies, and expectations are, then inspections should be able to occur on Friday afternoon at 4:30, the same way that we could schedule them for 3 weeks out. This is a level 1 review. In other words, you just show up. But the partnership there is that everybody shares the same expectation, meaning the leaders have got to have a positive intent and focus on specific areas that they can provide feedback towards. So in other words, for a level 1 review, the first thing, you cannot perform a level 1 inspection or audit or review remotely. You cannot have, in my mind, somebody from corporate or a regional leader that performs a true level 1 multifamily inspection by cell phone. I mean, our on-site workers now, it's pretty standard to where every on-site person has a cell phone, at least, if not smartphone, based on the continuing acceptance of technology. And I still think it's impossible to do a remote inspection where somebody from the office carries their cell phone around, puts it on camera mode, and walks around the property to perform the inspection. No. I'm sorry, that's not a complete inspection. How can you get a sense of a make ready just out of a camera? I know we use it for tours and for remote tours and for that instance, that's good. But if we're talking about making business decisions or even getting a sense of how the property is performing currently, then I firmly believe that this has to be done in person. It might be challenging based on travel or how your leaders are positioned within your organization. But really and truly, you can't get any better than seeing the physical thing, interacting with it. When you go into the apartment, what does it smell like? What does the texture on the wall say? How clean does the apartment look? Okay, we could see that through the camera, but how clean does it feel? There's a difference there. You know, one of the ways that we can look at a level 1 inspection goes back to another common statement: trust but verify. You know, I would ask my maintenance teams, how are things going? You know, typical one-word answer: fine. we're overworked, we got too much to do, we're understaffed, all of those normal answers you get. Okay, but again, what does the term fine mean to the maintenance associate? It could mean that our maintenance person, technician, supervisor, to them, fine is that they've got all their work orders done so they can leave and go home on time, and no call came in last night. That's fine. But is that the same meaning as what our leaders need to see or confirm? The only way we do that is to go in person and actually walk around and see. And this is where that positive intent comes into play, to where we've got to be sure that our leader has the type of relationship with our maintenance person that when we point out things that are deficient or things that need to be changed, we do it in a way of wanting the best for the property and for our associate, for our worker. That requires a couple of things. The first is a relationship. In other words, I need to know my maintenance technician, my maintenance person. They need to know me. A relationship is required for that positive positive intent assumption to really, really work. The second thing is there needs to be a mutual understood respect that I want the best for you. And the best for you is identifying that when you open up the closet to the water heater, there's a lot of dust and dirt and old parts that have been thrown in here. And when the new resident comes, if they open it up, what do they think when they look at this? More on that point in a couple of minutes. But it is a partnership. And the third piece of that partnership to assume positive intent and get our employees as leaders to assume positive intent is to identify true, real, honest areas where success has occurred. In other words, if the last time I was here, I came as the leader and I'm inspecting make ready, and the last make ready I saw, we identified the need to clean out the water heater closet and all the spare parts there. The next time I come for a inspection, I better make a point to be intentional and open up the next closet and identify and acknowledge that, hey, do you see this? You did a great job of cleaning out this water heater closet. There's no dust in here. There's no old parts. It's fantastic. Congratulations. We acknowledge the change in behavior towards positive. There has to be, I'm not sure it has to be a mathematical ratio of one positive for one negative. I'm not sure that I buy into the positive sandwich level of change. You say one positive thing, then you say one criticism, and then you say a third positive thing. I got to admit, to me, whenever I identify somebody doing that to me, it feels like they're treating me as a mathematical equation, and I'm not sure that's the reality we're going for. Not only does a leader have to have positive intent, but our employee needs to understand that that is what it is, even when a correction is needed, even when a change in course is needed. Now, the part that we need to come back to, I brought it up. We were talking about that the water heater closet and the dust. And I made the statement of, imagine you were a resident and opened up this closet and saw the dust and the dirt. That view, or as we've done on a recent episode, reframing, is, I believe, essential when we begin looking at inspections. I mean, if we're walking around an entire property and you see some graffiti on the wall, you will have a different response to that graffiti based on your view. In other words, if I happen to be the overworked groundskeeper or entry-level maintenance technician, and I take a look at graffiti on the wall, all I see is more work. And not only that, it's a brick wall. So that means pressure washing will only do so much. I got to get in there and scrub with a chemical that it may take me a little while to identify that chemical, that I'm going to have to fight the fight in order to order the chemical and the scrub brushes and the PPE in order to do this correctly. And all I see is something else on my list that I have to do that already automatically goes to the top of the list that I'm, without the positive intent relationship, I'm going to have to get even further behind on what I'm supposed to be doing this month. However, viewed from the lens or the frame of a resident that sees graffiti, they see a property that is not caring for their surroundings. They possibly see crime on the rise because often graffiti is viewed as an indicator of crime. Correct or not? Remember, this is changing the lens of view. In other words, we're changing the perception. What if I looked at that graffiti on the wall from the lens of an investor for the management company that owns this property? What would I think about that? What does that say for an investment strategy? Maybe it says, hey, this is a community that's got a large opportunity for improvement. In other words, if I invest my money here, we have a big improvement that we can do, which will lead to larger financial growth. That also brings to the challenge of this change in view. It's possible that that last change in view can lead to the first change in view changing to, well, you know what? As the groundskeeper, if I leave the graffiti there, that means investors will want to spend their money, and that's good for us, right? I know that's a huge exaggeration, but I'm hoping, Mr. and Mrs. Listener, you get my meaning. When we do inspections, our scoring and our thoughts about an inspection are subjective. They change by our role, by the day. Heck, they can even change by season, weather, year, whether the coffee was good that morning, whether I've had lunch or not. Maybe even by the relationship that I'm having with people in my outside of work life. This is why that relationship piece and having understanding of what the positive intent is by an inspection. I can remember when I began standardizing inspections for a management company that I began and I explained by asking the regional team and the corporate team, how often should a property be operating in their good, acceptable standard level? And the response I got back from the corporate team was all the time. Our properties, they operate that way all the time. I said, great, then I will start inspections next week. Okay, where are you going to start? I don't know. Well, let me know when you get that schedule. No. And the looks I got back from people were curious. Couple were downright offended or argumentative. What do you mean you're not going to tell me when you're going to go buy my property? You just said the properties are always in a good shape. Always means I could go leave here right now and head out to any of our properties, and they should be at an acceptable standard. Well, they're not. Okay, then do you want to amend your previous statement? You know, as a speaker, when I go to give a class, a course, when I go to develop somebody, I have a habit of asking for feedback. How was the lesson? How did it work? Was it applicable? Did you have actionable information that you received from attending my session? And I'm very, very glad and relieved to say that quite frequently I get back positive results of, yes, it was great. I learned something. This was wonderful. And those are good. They're validating. They're good for my ego. But if I'm honest, I'm looking for the negative, the not condemning information. But, if all we get back is positive results, then nothing is identified as needing to change. And in my case, in this example, if all I get back is positive responses that everything was great and wonderful, well, then good. I covered everything appropriately, completely, and I'm not going to change anything between now and the next time I do it. Because the only way we get to identify areas where we as individuals can change is when we identify deficiencies. Because if it wasn't deficient, we wouldn't change. What that translates to is I absolutely cherish when I'm speaking. And if I happen to be speaking to you, dear listener, and anywhere, I do give you permission to come up to me at the end or end of the session and respectfully, please, no 4-letter words or colorful language, but let me know areas where I could have served you better in that class, in that time. Where did I miss the mark? Because I cherish that information, because I know for a fact I am not a perfect presenter. I am not a brilliant writer. And you know what? Our teams are that way too. If we're all honest as employees, we know that we are not living 100% up to the job expectations. Now, some of that is ignorance. We don't know or have the specific define of what the expectations are for any job that we do. And if somebody gives me a good score when I can clearly see that there are deficient things, then I'm not going to change anything about my property until the next time. That's where that positive intent comes into. In the same way, I would hope that an attendee of my class or my session would come up to me and tell me where I could improve, because I know I need to improve. We as leaders, when we are performing these property inspections, we need to have the positive intent of, I'm identifying this particular deficiency because I want you and this property to get better. That's ultimately where that expectation comes from. So how can we do this? Let's have a strategy. Okay. First, have a strategy of paying attention to the details today, right here, right now, where they are. I actually refer to this as the airport faucet strategy. Because you see, I do travel a lot. And for the past 20 years of my career, I've spent some years, over 40 weeks a year on the road, Monday through Friday, spent a lot of time in hotels, into and out of airports. I can't say it's the best part of my job, but I must not like it too little or be too averse to it, because I continue to show up at the airport. But you see, the reason why I say paying attention to the details as they are right now is the airport faucet strategy is because I can't tell you how often I've come home from the airport after going through multiple airports or spending all week on the road, and I get to my house to go to wash my hands at my bathroom faucet, and I instantly just stick my hands underneath the faucet and expect water to come out. Have you been to an airport lately? All the faucets in an airport are infrared. meaning you put your hand underneath and the water comes out. You get used to that in an airport. And I confess, I've gotten used to that so much from time to time that I come back home and I put my hands under the faucet, and then I have that moment of realization of, oh, I'm not paying attention to the details right here. When we as leaders go to perform an inspection, level 1 inspection, pay attention to the details right that instant. What does the dumpster area look like? What does the roof line? What about the gutters? What about the trees? Are they overgrown? Do we have a potential liability hazard that you can see as you're doing whatever kind or type of inspection that you're doing? And look, framing things, taking a different view, the different perception. I've talked about that in terms of a mental exercise, looking at things like a new resident, looking at things as if you were a maintenance technician, a corporate, an investor, an owner, all of these different things. But really, framing is not just mental. Change the physical. By that, I mean, if you are performing inspection, a property inspection, and you take out of that office and you turn to the right all the time, or for those of you on video, maybe I should be pointing this way to go to the right. Do yourself a favor and change direction. Don't walk the same way every time. Pick a different path. I had one regional that she was 6'7" tall. She's a very tall woman, and she wore stiletto heels. So she was taller even so, to where when she went into doors of apartments, she had to duck her head, so that her hair or her head didn't hit the door frame. But I was fascinated by when she would show up to my property to do an inspection. She had slacks on. She still wore the heels. I mean, very business, very professional. But when we went to go into a vacant apartment, she kicked off the heels. And not only that, she had a towel with her so that she could get down on her knees. And one of the coolest things that she did, and Mary, if you're still out there, I do remember. She would go into the bathroom, put the towel down, get on her knees, and then not to just look underneath the cabinet, but she would get down on her knees and stoop down so that she could actually see under the bathroom countertop, under the banjo, that's that counter that goes over the top of the tank, that we maintenance technicians are just so thankful that some interior designer thought it was a brilliant idea to run the counter across the top of the toilet. Try and replace a fill valve or even a flapper in between the tank and the countertop. But the reason I bring that up is Mary was very, very detailed, to where she'd look in between that area and oftentimes find gum or things that we or our cleaners had missed. Change your physical place, elevation, change your transportation. If you do an inspection by driving around the property, next time walk. Next time, get in a golf cart if you have that. Change framing, not just mentally, but physically. Oh, and by the way, one other thing, change the time of day. I know that may be challenging depending on where you have to travel from or to, but it's a good idea to view the property in the morning, at lunchtime, and in the evening, because things change. Different things look differently when you're laying your eyes on, and when you go do a level 1 inspection, they change based on all the variables. So if we're going to go see the way things are now, unscheduled, positive intent, and multiple different views, all of that summarizes a level 1 multifamily inspection. We're going to take a break to pay some bills. And when we come back, we're going to talk about applying a level 2 framework and a level 3 framework to a multifamily community. See you in a minute.
Our sponsor today is AppWork. Best known for exceptional maintenance workflow management, AppWork offers so much more. Optimize operations with its advanced business intelligence that turns data into strategy. Simplify your operations with AppWork's intuitive platform. Service team members love the gamification of maintenance workflows and leaderboards, making everyday tasks a competition for number one. From project management to team communication, AppWork has you covered. Visit appworkco.com today.
All right, welcome back. Now, we're talking about inspections in the multifamily world, and we're using from an organizing principle, ASHRAE levels. Level 1 is the go there, see what it's doing right now in person. Level 2 is taking that, see what it's doing right now in person, and applying data, background data for how or why it's working that way. And level 3, that's a performance inspection. In other words, taking both parts of level 1 and level 2 and then applying to that decision making or thoughts on decision making. So we're at point level 2 now. And level 2 really boils down to one word in my mind for a multifamily inspection, and that's compliance. Yes, level 1, we see how it's doing. Level 2 is where we get into why is it doing how it's doing. That's where, from a maintenance standpoint, a maintenance leader on site, supervisor, or whoever is responsible for leading the maintenance team must be prepared. This, I think, is one big difference between a level 1 multifamily inspection and a level 2, and that is preparation. If we're saying on one hand that level 1 inspection can occur at any point in time, that means that it's possible my maintenance supervisor may not have all the information and may need to go do some research to find an answer to a question on what the current conditions are, just because running a property is busy and there's stuff going on all the time. That's different in the case of a level 2 inspection. A level 2 inspection is a scheduled event with prior knowledge that it's about to occur. And the reason why is because, as we're about to discuss, our on-site maintenance leader needs to have some information compiled in order to make this inspection happen as efficiently and over as short a time frame as possible. In other words, my maintenance leader needs to know as a beginning about occupancy and exposure. In other words, if our property is at 93% occupied and we have a exposure over the next 6 weeks that we're going to drop down to 86%, what does that mean? Meaning at 93%, we've got 12 apartments vacant. If we get down to 83%, we now have 30 apartments vacant. And I'm just running numbers. I'm sure somebody math is going to figure out that I am now working on a property that has, 562 and a half apartments, because my math is not very mathic. But our maintenance leader for a level 2 inspection should know that level of detail. Because if over the next 6 weeks we're going to drop that far in occupancy, our maintenance leader is going to have to be ready for what we're doing in response. Not only that, that information will feed other questions that will need to be known on this level 2 inspection. Things like, well, if we have that much exposure over the next 6 weeks, that explains why last week I put in however many POs in order to order the vendors and the painters and get those scheduled beforehand. Plus, we need a lot of parts and caulking and tools and faucets and fixtures and filters and all of the things that we're going to need to get at least some of those apartments ready in a short period of time so that our office can begin leasing. This implies that our maintenance supervisor is involved in the budget sense, because if our exposure is that big, then our budget is going to be much exposed. Meaning, if we budgeted on an annual basis for our property to be operating at 90% occupied, that means that we had planned on ordering only so many drip pans or only so many air conditioning filters. We planned that out last year during budget season. However, now we've got an exposure going forward that our current performance, well, we're going to be over budget. And that's going to come out during a level 2 inspection. And our maintenance supervisor needs to have an answer for what that looks like, why it is, and show that right now we've spent a lot more money than what we had originally planned back in January. Why? This is why. Apartments, needs, all of the reasons. Our maintenance supervisor also needs to be planned for status updates on projects. For instance, maybe your property, on a previous inspection, you identified the need to clean out the gutters. Well, in order to clean out the gutters, we needed to find a vendor because our property doesn't have the ladders or the tools necessary for getting up to that level. So the maintenance supervisor brought in 3 vendors, got one scope of work for those 3 vendors to give them prices. And it's at this point that during a level 2 inspection, we go into depth about how, what those look like, so that during a follow-up level 3 inspection, we can make decisions in how that's going to look, get all the scheduling done, and have all of that happening. What about our current needs at the property? If a level 1 inspection is just how we perform right now, level 2, what needs do we have based on our current performance? In other words, this is a data-driven opportunity for our on-site maintenance team to provide reasons for where we are right now. The reason why the dumpster looks so bad is because we didn't have the money in the paint budget, and when I requested it prior, it didn't get approved for me to paint it. So we pressure washed it instead, and it looks better, but that's why it is the way it is today. All of this goes back to the fact that a level 2 inspection is focused on what it is right now with background information. And maintenance leaders on site, this is your opportunity to shine. This is your opportunity to provide those reasonings why things are the way they are. Not defensively, not disrespectfully, but just they are. It's possible that this is the point where we as on-site personnel get the opportunity to point out deficiencies to our leaders in the financial realm of, you know what, the pressure washer that we used for that dumpster that we just finished with, it's on its last legs. Matter of fact, it took us 4 hours to do just the dumpster area, where really it should have only taken us an hour and a half. And that includes the half hour of setup. We had to keep going back and forth because our old pressure washer kept blowing seals and gaskets that we had to constantly change and repair while we were doing that simple job. Pointing things like that out to our leaders is necessary for us. And it goes back to that positive intent, turned the opposite direction. Level 1, we discussed leaders having a positive intent to ensure that our on-site workers are not being set up to fail, But when we point out deficiencies, it's an opportunity for improvement and an opportunity for recognition. In level 2, the positive intent still continues from the leaders down, but the opposite way has to be observed as well. If I'm an on-site maintenance supervisor and there are things that previous decisions were made that have made my job more challenging and difficult, okay, my job is more challenging and difficult. Guess what? Entropy is job security. Things are going to fail, things are going to break. That's not an excuse. That doesn't mean, here's that positive intent part. That doesn't mean I get to point out to my leaders, well, because you turned down the pressure washer, it took us too long. You don't need to point that out. Chances are your leader remembers that decision. They may have had other reasons why they made that decision. And in the end, today, where we are in current situation, it doesn't even matter. What matters is we use the pressure washer. It still works. I can still get the job done. It just takes longer than normal. So this is what we did. The facts are it took 4 hours. It may have taken less time had we a new pressure washer. And that's it. Move on about it, because the positive intent is if my leader cares about me and wants to see my development, it reverses. This is called, the concept here is 360 leadership. In other words, if I am the follower in this equation, if the leader has positive intent towards me, I have positive intent towards my leader, because the reality is if my leader succeeds, then my leader wants me to succeed too. Therefore, if my leader gives a decision that I don't agree with, they're still my leader. I need to make the best I can with the resources I have available to me. In other words, boss, leader, the decision you made, we're having a hard time meeting time, but we got it done and we could get it done. Any chance on getting a new pressure washer next year or next quarter or next time period? Any chance on doing that? That's it. No blame, acknowledgement of where we are, and moving on. That way, my leader knows I support them in their decision, and they hired me for my opinion. In my opinion, we'd do a lot better with a new pressure washer. I get the fact that the answer was no, and I'll live with it being no. But I would be irresponsible in doing my job if I didn't bring up a possible solution to an issue. It's amazing how the statement that we began this entire episode with, inspect what you expect, leads to interpersonal issues, soft skills, leadership skills, managerial, budget, financial, all of these things, which is why a level 3 inspection I refer to as a performance inspection. Because you see, a property that has employees that are, the big buzzword right now is engaged. That means that the employees are on board and they are empowered to do what they need to do in order to meet whatever standards our inspections are designed to verify. I mean, let's keep in mind, inspection, it's a verification. Inspect what you expect. That means I expect this level, so I'm going to be sure we're at this level. If I expect this level and I hold you to this standard, as a leader, I'm failing you. If that standard is higher than expectations, I'm failing you if I haven't empowered you to make decisions beyond what expectations are. At the same time, if I'm a leader and I hold you to an expected level, or I have an expected level and I don't hold you to that expected level, I come in lower than that expected level, then as a leader, I'm setting you up to be disciplined. Because if the organization says you're supposed to be at a level 100 and I treat you as it's acceptable that you're only performing at 80, then the rest of the organization is looking for 100, and the rest of the organization perceives that you are deficient because you are doing 80. But I, the leader, have actually failed you because I'm only empowering you to do 80. That remaining 20 in this made up fictional leveling, I've set you up to fail. And that's where level 3 comes into play. Level 3, I would consider as a performance inspection. We take information from the hands-on, the actual way things are today inspection, the level 1 inspection, and we apply to it the data that we mine, the information that we gather, the why things are the way they are in level 2. And we sit down and we begin to ensure that the on-site team is empowered to either make decisions that they need to make or empowered to go out and investigate possible solutions to deficiencies identified during level 1 and level 2 so that the leaders can approve them. You know, a level 3 inspection, that performance inspection, I like to look at it as steering a car. I was a part of a committee a while back for a new organization. That this organization was growing in its size, and the committee was charged with creating a direction to go. And they had a big decision to make of, do we do this one thing or do we do this other thing? They'd explored multiple different options, and in the end, it came down to an A and B choice, and they had to make a choice between A or B. And we went around the table at the committee, and everybody did a in-person vote. It was a very safe space to where we didn't need to do blind and point fingers and blame, and it was a very, very good discussion. And in the end, there was about half that decided choice A and the other half decided choice B. I think it was slightly weighted towards one or the other, but in the end, it was there. And then the leader of the group made a final decision. But they made the final decision based on the fact that the committee brought up that both would be equally relevant and had the same chance for success. Just they were different directions. But the leader brought up this point, and I love it to this day. It does guide me an awful lot more than I think I even realized. The point he said was, it's easier to steer a moving car than a parked one. Therefore, we're going to decide this way. And then we go. And from that standpoint, we didn't even look at the other option anymore. Everybody was on board because it's easier to steer a moving car. A level 3 inspection gives us either a clear direction we need to move and then we move, or it'll give us options that we need to investigate. So safely, within whatever decision-making ability and enablement that you have within your role, move the car, steer it. That may mean taking a U-turn later, but unless you commit to moving in one direction, then nothing is going to change. So a level 3 inspection, that's where we take that information and compile it and move it forwards. Make choices. You see, level 1 and level 2 inspections at the end of the day, they both indicate muscle memory, especially if we're performing level 1 on a cadence of every month, quarter, biannually, annually, depending on which inspection we're looking at. But if we have that level of inspection performed a couple or a few times, you begin to see trends. You can plot them on a chart. You can put them on a spreadsheet, results from both, which is awesome. But unless that information over time those trends are put into decision making, then the level 3 audit is not actually occurring. Level 1 and level 2 indicate muscle memory. In other words, we've made these decisions over and over in the past, which has led us to this level or this type of performance. Level 3 audit says, because of that muscle memory, we are where we are. What can we change to change our performance? For instance, what if we begin to notice that during the second quarter of the year, we have a lot more move-outs than any other quarter? Why? Well, in surveys that we've done with residents, the moving out is because the part of the country that this property happens to be in gets really, really hot during the summer, and residents just get fed up and they don't like the heat. Well, does that mean then that going forward, what if when the apartment was vacant, if we're dealing with heat, what if we do a thorough preventive maintenance and double check of the refrigerant levels and the performance of our air conditioning systems during the vacancy of the apartment so that the air conditioning equipment operates better, so that over the lifespan of our new resident, when they live there, their indoor environment is more comfortable during the hot months. And then we, at the end of Q3, beginning of Q4, what if we go in, and that's the point at which we do a preventive maintenance, and we train our on-site maintenance teams to talk to residents and point out the fact that, we just went through a summer with 3 weeks that were over triple digits of, stupid hot temperatures. Go back and view some of the Maintenance Mindset Minute for the definition of stupid temperatures. But here's the thing. If we begin having a strategy that we identify during a level 3 audit, then the next time we come around Q3, Q4 with our level 1 or level 2 audit, we can identify the decision that was made at the beginning of the year during the level 3 audit and see if it made a difference. See if our resident satisfaction scores or our CX scores or whatever type of metrics that we're keeping track of have adjusted. That's just one example of how a level 3 audit can occur. Oh, and from a takeaway for our session today, to kind of begin to summarize and bring this all down to one level. Inspect what you expect. Keep in mind that we're just dealing with snapshots. Details matter. Positive intent. And not only that, if you are a leader who doesn't report to that property on a regular basis, little side note, be situationally aware. If leaders, you're approached by residents, keep in mind that it's possible that resident may have been dealt with differently than a decision that you're about to make with whatever that resident is coming to you with. If your decision is different than what the property manager's decision or the maintenance supervisor's decision or anybody else's decision is, in effect, you become mom or dad that is being played against dad or mom. And as parents, for those of you listening who are parents, that is a tough thing to navigate. The way around that is ensure that mom and dad are on the same page in the same book. And ultimately, that's the goal of any of these levels of inspection. Be sure that our on-site teams are meeting the expectations that are set. In order to do that, it's possible you identify deficiencies in empowerment, finances, performance, staffing, time management, workflow, supplies. Maybe even that the whole property is performing at a different level than the level it is marketed at. I hope you've enjoyed it looking at our statement of inspect what you expect today. I would love to hear your thoughts and comments, maybe even share some tips or tricks. You can share those things at the Multifamily Media Network webpage, or direct message me on LinkedIn, or do yourself a favor, like and subscribe this video on whatever platform that you happen to be looking at. Until I hear from you, because I'm curious where I'm deficient in this opportunity that you have for a level 1 inspection of this particular episode. Thank you for joining me. I hope you have a fantastic rest of the week, and I'll see you somewhere.
Thank you again to AppWork for sponsoring today's episode. Imagine carrying a digital make-ready board in your pocket with work order tracking and maintenance technician leaderboards designed to gamify the process and bring out your team's competitive best. AppWork offers solutions to headaches that have plagued the multifamily industry for decades. Visit www.appworkco.com today.